All right. Good evening, everybody. We are Heart of a Mother, and we are here having a Q&A session for those new to homeschooling. And so we've got a lot of questions to cover and some great panelists who are here to help me answer those questions. And so hopefully you will enjoy this conversation, whether you're here with us live tonight or you're watching the recording. You can hopefully find something that will help you in your homeschooling journey. But of course, before we get started, we should start in prayer as always. So let's do that in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh Lord, we give you thanks and praise for the privilege of homeschooling. Thank you for the children whom you have so wonderfully created and entrusted to us. Thank you for spouses who support and encourage this vocation with practical support and encouragement. Thank you for the individuals you place in our lives to inspire and guide us along this journey. We humbly embrace your divine mercy and offer our regrets for the many times we have doubted your presence and your power and turned away from you. Sweet Jesus, you were taught by our Blessed Mother's love, Saint Joseph's hard work, and God the Father's infinite wisdom. Help us to imitate the intimacy and charity of your holy family in our own homeschools. God, please bless and strengthen our marriages, and give us this day the heavenly graces we require to guide our children to a greater love of you and increased knowledge and understanding of the ordered world and goodness of humanity which you have created. May our hearts always be accepting of the holy will of our Father in heaven for our families, and may our ears be open to hear the guidance of the Holy Spirit in each moment. We surrender this hour and every coming hour to you, Lord, as we begin anew to love you and serve you. Amen. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
So our list of questions kind of ranges all over the place from super simple and straightforward to the big, huge questions that could take us probably hours to answer. So we'll do our best to kind of touch on everything. And like I said, don't forget to drop your additional questions in the chat box. And moms, if you see questions you can answer, jump right on in and answer those as we get going. First question, let's do a simple question. When do you start your year and end your year? Selena?
So we start our year in June, which is really weird for most homeschool families, but Texas is hot and summer is brutal and we can only go to this pool so much. My kids still have extracurriculars in the summer, so we really don't get a break from Taekwondo. So we start in June, usually around Pentecost, a week before or a week after. And we school heavily all the way until Advent. And then Advent, we take a break on subject work, history, science. We focus on the seasons of Advent and Christmas. And then from Epiphany till Ash Wednesday, we'll review subjects, look at timelines, look at math, do that hard grading of math, and then we will take a break from Lent until Easter Sunday. So that's our school year. It's very different. It's non-traditional. It follows a liturgical year, but it's worked for us, especially elementary and younger. I know that might change for middle school and for secondary education, but it has flowed very nicely for elementary.
Awesome. What about you guys, Jen?
We never stop. We just go year round. As Selena said, it is miserably hot in Texas, and you can only go to the pool so many times. So actually, we hit summer pretty heavy in school, and then we'll take small breaks. My husband enjoys traveling. We like the mountains. We'll go to the mountains once or twice a year, just whenever it works out for his work schedule. We'll take a week off and head to Colorado and do some hiking and come back. Sometimes we bring school books in the car. Sometimes we do them. Sometimes we don't. We just kind of pretty much default to we're always doing school unless something better comes up. So.
Awesome. I love to hear the flexibility and what works for each family. Let's see if I can mute this. Okay. Like Selena said, our school year actually has changed as we moved into middle school, high school, really into high school. But so for years, the first maybe 8, 9, 10 years of our homeschooling, we did what I first heard to be called Sabbath schooling, where we would school for 6 weeks and then take a week off. School for 6 weeks, take a week off all year round. And I would try to time those breaks around, holidays, feast days, things like that. And so as the years went on, it turned into not quite 6 weeks, 7, and 1 off. It was like we'd school for 6 to 8 weeks, and then we'd take 1 to 2 weeks off, and then 6 to 8 weeks, and then 1 to 2 weeks. But we still did school mostly through the summer. We haven't always lived in Texas, but it just worked better for us. But yes, as my kids got into kind of 8th grade-ish, they really wanted to take summers off, and some of their online classes took summer off. And so we kind of shifted into starting on the Feast of the Assumption in August, on August 15th, and then ending, well, technically ending before my oldest son's birthday in June. But they would always kind of finish way before that. Like we'd taper off. We always had a few things we were wrapping up, but things would taper off at the end of the year. So we would take like the end of June through the middle of August off, is what we're doing basically right now. We do some school, my elementary kids still do some things over the summer to keep them fresh and keep them going. I call it a summer term, but it's really not formal. It's like, if we do a math page, then we get to do a science project or things like that. So that's what's worked for us. And I just love that it's flexible and you can do what works for you. I know families that start their school year in January and end in November. So they have like, or October or whatever. So they have that year, an actual school year that is different, and they would change grade levels in January. So there's all kinds of options, and it is completely up to you. All right, now we'll go deep. Next question, choosing a curriculum. Do you recommend an all-in-one program or mix and match piecemeal together? Jen?
I recommend really sitting down and thinking about how your kids learn and how you want to teach. I started out with Abeka. I got the whole curriculum, all the pieces, went to their presentation where they'll lay it all out for you, and I just picked out one of everything, brought it home, and I realized my oldest at the time really enjoyed it, and I hated it. I enjoy picking out my own curriculum, planning what we're going to do after we finish this book and having that flexibility. So I just one by one started tossing out the pieces. As we'd finish an Abeka book, we didn't go back to Abeka. I'd be reading, I'd look at something else. That worked for me. And in there, then I started seeing, all right, I chose this new piece, didn't work for my child. So we'd toss that out and we try something else. And we've found something that makes me happy right now, works for me. I'm excited every morning, and it works for each one of my kids too. And that's probably taken us, I mean, that's still a work in progress, as I have a brand new first grader this year. I have already tried out and tossed 2 things. And, you know, we kind of transferred her into first grade in May, so it hasn't been long. Don't be afraid to change, I would say, and realize that the curriculum needs to serve you and your kids as you're deciding if you want a box with everything in it sent to you versus picking and choosing. And you're not locked in stone ever. So you can say, I pick and choose, I hate this, it's too confusing to me, I'm gonna go order something from this company. Do it, try it. You know, try it out, swap with friends. If you need to look at some things before you put that money down and invest, but you have 100% flexibility, and you are the teacher and you are the principal, so you decide.
I think that's an excellent point. And I know that, see if I can get these all muted. I know that I always recommend to people just starting out homeschooling, if you have no experience, to just pick something and go with it. That's how I started. We just chose Mater Amabilis. We just did it full on. And then, like Jen said, each year as I saw different things working and different things not working, then I would shift here and there. Because I think it's really great to have a backbone in a starting place. It totally works as well if you kind of pick a general approach and program, and then even before you start, you go, yeah, but this part right here, I don't want to do, and be flexible in that regard as well. So I think it depends on your personality, your kid's personality, but I always think that mom has to like it. I like what you said, Jen, is that if mom's not excited about it, it's not going to get done, or it's going to get done with a negative attitude that's contagious. And you don't want that.
Right.
You don't want that. What about you, Selena? What do you recommend usually?
I think it really depends on the age. I mean, if you're starting out with a pre-K, you really don't need to buy a full box set from anyone. You really don't need to, unless you don't have a library and you don't have books in your house and you don't have snacks. I mean, you can learn math by counting snacks, and you can buy a read aloud set if you want, or you can check out books from the library. And that's really all you need pre-K, even halfway into kindergarten. But if you have a third grader and they've been in full-time school, you might want to buy a box set from Catholic Heritage or Seton or Colby or Mother Divine Grace. For me, it depends on the personality of the mom. If you don't want to sit down and be reading all day long or all morning long, you probably don't want to go with Mother Divine Grace or Mater Amabilis if that's not your style. But that's what I love, so that's what we chose. But if if your kids don't like workbooks, maybe not Seton. So it depends on the age, really, like where are they coming from, and where are they going to, like what do they like, and on the personality of the mom. Those are like the two big factors. Because and that was the advice given to me. You don't need a full curriculum really until third grade, and I did not believe it, but they were totally right. And it was a good wisdom point for me to save some money and then invest that money in other areas, like investing in good books for our home instead of investing in curriculum we weren't ready for.
Excellent advice. Yeah, I think that knowing where you're coming into homeschooling and where you're heading homeschooling is important. I meant to mention at the beginning of this call that most of our answers, or all of our answers, will focus on assuming that you're continuing to homeschool as long as it keeps working for your family. And not doing, the pandemic schooling or just schooling for 1 year until schools open normally or whatever is going to happen. Because my advice would be different in those situations. Because like you said, Selena, if they're coming out of a brick and mortar school and maybe going back into one, you really do need to kind of keep some consistency in their life since everything else is crazy, and go with something more set. Although you can still tweak it, and you should, to fit your family's needs. Everybody will probably be happier in that scenario. So just mentioning that. And I think too, one thing that wasn't mentioned is you get to decide. We are a Catholic homeschooling moms group. And so we are going to always recommend Catholic resources and Catholic curricula. That there are a lot of families that will say, I choose either all Catholic or all secular, because then I know I don't have to worry too much about anti-Catholic stuff. If you choose Christian materials, I feel like you always have to watch carefully to make sure that there's not that bias. For myself, just to speak to that, I don't feel confident in my watered down catechesis and public school education to differentiate when there's a bias or when there's a problem with a curriculum. So I'm really careful about making sure I choose Catholic resources or secular resources or something Christian that I know lots of other people have said have no problems, especially with history, things related to Bible stories and things like that. So that's another consideration. Jen, you mentioned something that is one of our other questions though. How do you decide when a curriculum choice isn't working for you or your child? Like what makes that, okay, this is the curriculum and I need to change it, not just, we don't like math.
Yeah, I think that's a little fuzzy. If we don't like math goes on and on and on for a couple months, or even a couple weeks, I'm starting to look around. I'm looking, I'm reading, I'm asking questions from other moms. What do you use? I would give it, I don't know, 3-6 months, a good shake. If it's miserable for them and if nothing is clicking, and we will try something else. And if I hate it for that long, if I'm starting to skip days and not teaching a subject because I don't enjoy it at all, so I'm looking somewhere else. But I'm a bit of a curriculum nerd, so I'm kind of always looking. I'm always reading about new teaching materials, but I would say a few months.
Okay. I think that's wise. I think you can't know if something's not working unless you do it for a decent length of time.
Yeah, right.
Because you have to give it that chance. Selena, do you have thoughts on that too?
I completely agree. I think you have to at least try it for maybe 6 weeks, consistently, and that doesn't mean every day. You know, it could be your science curriculum that you use twice a week that all of a sudden it goes to once a week and then it's never, and that's an indicator. But it has to be a consistent habit for you to say it's not working. That's like saying, you know, it's just a habit. It's a habit choice. And if, for me, it's if it's ruining a relationship, if it's causing strife, that's another indicator that this isn't going to work. If my son or my daughter automatically starts crying when it's time to do reading lessons, that's an indicator that this style isn't working.
That's a really good point. Yeah, definitely. I love those tips. I agree with everything you guys said. So we have all this, whatever curriculum you choose, you mentioned you have to be consistent and you have to try it and you have to do it. I think once somebody said the best curriculum is the one you're going to do. But how do you do that, especially maybe when you have more than one kid? You've got, you know, 4 kids that you're homeschooling and they all have all their materials and all their books, and then scheduling so that what does that other kid do when you're teaching math to one kid? You know, you've got reading instruction is one-on-one. Math is often one-on-one. How do you manage at your house teaching all the different kids all the different things in a day? Selena?
I think Jen would be better. I only have 3 that I'm teaching.
I know, but
Well, and for me, for reading lessons, I alternate days. So I have 2 kids doing reading lessons. So Mondays and Wednesdays are my son, Tuesdays and Thursdays are my daughter, and then Friday, everyone has a different read aloud that we do together, one-on-one. So I have 3 one-on-ones back to back that they're reading to me. So it's nice for me because then I can calendar plan, I can be washing dishes, they're at the bar reading their book to me. So that's one way I do reading. Mathematics, my oldest is independent on mathematics, so I can't really speak to that. My middle is gaining independence and just has daily checks. My youngest, my kindergartner, we're not doing math yet. He just counts popcorn and eats them, and that's it.
yay.
That's a great subtract.
That's very good advice. Jen, what about you? What would you say to that?
Okay, so this is a big part of the reason we go all year. I feel like spreading it out all year, I can slow it down and bounce around as the kids need me. We have several of our books that we're doing right now are just workbooks that I bought off Amazon. Their spelling, their vocabulary, their geography, those are all just Amazon workbooks that I got. They wake up in the morning and grab breakfast and do the next page. So anyone who can read sits down and does their own work for several of their subjects. As many subjects as I can, that would be history, science, and catechesis, we do all together. They're all doing the same grade level. I'm reading out loud with those because I don't want them to miss key points because they're stumbling over big words. So I'm reading that, I'm asking questions as we go. And everyone's on the same grade level. And some people are a little lost because it's a bit advanced, and some people have moments of being a tiny bit bored because it's too easy, and we just plow through and you get what you get out of those. I think the material is so good, it doesn't matter if it's not exactly perfect. And then things where they do need the one-on-one phonics, math, and whatnot, we will just go slowly. I'm not giving everybody a new lesson every single day. They have days where all they're doing is review of the lesson that they had the day before, more practice problems, for example. And I don't have any kind of schedule. I'm not the most organized person, but I'm watching them. You know, if someone's struggling here, okay, you're spending a couple more days reviewing. Okay, the next person looks like they're getting the material. I'm going to give you maybe 2 new lessons or 3 new lessons in a row. And so I'm just kind of watching the kids to see, with in the back of my mind always, my struggling student needs to take longer. We have 12 months. We have 12 months. And really, you have more. You really do have more. If it needs to take you 1.5 years to do the schoolwork, it's nobody. I guess it could be different by state. Certainly in Texas, nobody's breathing over my shoulder telling me I have to be done by a certain point. But really in general, you're the decider of what your child needs to learn and at what pace they need to go. You are creating their own, individualized education plan. And If that means 15 months for math, that's okay. So.
Excellent point. Excellent points. Let's see, a few tips that have been told to me that I think are fantastic. One is when you're choosing materials, you guys mentioned kind of this, is to balance out the things that need mom and the things they can do independently. So my ideal curriculum might be this, and this, but that would be all mom all the time. I can't do that. There's just one of me. So one of those things, maybe two of those things go, and I throw in a workbook, or I throw in a video, or I throw in something that will teach the same thing without mom. The second thing is to prioritize their learning to read. As soon as they can read fluently, they can read directions and do that independent work. So even if you don't do very much else with that child, you know, the kinder, first, second grader, that should be the priority over other things. So like you think in your head, we have to do the reading lessons that we're scheduled to do this week. If we don't do anything else, that helps. My goal really is to have my kids working independently by 6th grade with very little help from me. Now they get help from me and we work together on certain things that I choose that we're going to work together. But theoretically, if we had a situation in life where I could not give them any attention, I could hand them work and they could do it and they could learn. So I choose some, like I said, some materials that have video learning components, lots of things that they read and respond on their own, so that they have that. And then I can pick and choose the stuff that I really want us to do together, which most of it is done in our morning basket, to put all those different ages together and spend that time on those subjects that we can combine, like Jen said. We did an entire call on morning basket stuff. So that's in the group. If you need to find that, I can help you find that, because I know that was someone else's question. But we absolutely, I really want them to work independently because that helps me and I can be at peace that way. Similar question though. So that's about like actually schooling the kids. What about the kids who are little and not schooling and all over the place? What is your top 2 tips for dealing with the age 0 to preschool that aren't quite doing the school thing? Jen?
My number one thing that we do, and this is probably going to sound bad to y'all, but they each have an iPad, and we have only educational apps on there. We have Touch and Write, Endless Wordplay. There's really great Montessori apps out there that are very simple, not a lot of background music and noise and things like that. They can quietly work on those while other kids are working, and they feel excited because they're getting their screen time. But it's all education. So we've really disciplined ourselves. There are 0 games on there at all. And so they think of those, they think of that as game time, and they're learning their phonics or whatever. And so we do that, and I'll bring that out if I really need to focus with someone and I need to not be interrupted. Otherwise, backyard, board books, just allowing them to draw nearby. But for focused attention, the iPads come out.
Yeah, no, that is what works. That is what works. I think my 2 biggest tips are, one is to keep them close by, no matter what they're doing, even if they're destroying a bookshelf. If they're in the same room as you, then there's less likely to be you pulled away to deal with a disaster, because you can kind of catch things. So if you can find a place to homeschool and a situation where they can be mostly contained in the area near you, and then bring in things that will occupy them that are only used during that school time. So whether that's those iPads, or whether you have boxes of toys that are only during school, or they get their own workbook from Dollar Tree to scribble on, is find some things that are not mom involved, that are just, they can do only during that time, and it keeps them interested for a little while. We were talking about this last week, and Amy Lerner made a great point that all the tricks and tips on working with little kids and keeping them busy while you're homeschooling the older kids only work for a little bit at a time. And then you got to switch to a new tactic. It's just the way kids are. They change and develop, and they get bored, and novelty works. So you're not going to find a method necessarily that will work for 5 years for all 5 of your little toddlers. It's going to be, trial and error, switch things up. You just got to keep that positive attitude. Selena, other thoughts?
We really enjoy outdoor exercise with our younger two while our oldest is doing her SACS and math. SACS and math is hard. It takes a lot of diligence. It takes about 45 minutes to do one lesson, but she loves it. So if she loves it, I'm going to do whatever it takes to help her finish it. So that means me and the kids, I'm training the kids to do pull-ups. We're going outside and walking around. My oldest, my middle child is running laps. We're riding bikes and scooters. It's only 30 or 45 minutes that we're outside in the morning in Texas at 9 a.m. It's not that hot. And they really don't have energy to do anything else other than sit down and play with toys. So I found that I think I started when he was 2. We would just get out and get exercise, even 20, 30 minutes. And then he would sit down and play with a box of toys for 20 minutes. And then he would sit down and play with water in the bathtub for 10 minutes. But I had to get that exercise in first. So that was my tip.
That makes sense. Yeah. Especially with those boys and kids who move around a lot and who are very physical and busy. They need that time. Awesome tips. And again, we have lots of tips on that in the group as well. Alexis says we were using naps, but then the baby stopped napping. So I've already learned that's true. Definitely can't depend on the same thing all the time, right? Homeschooling, I mean, if you think of parenting and how you have to constantly adapt and change and be flexible, homeschooling is that on steroids. It's just, you have to continue to reevaluate and see what's working and what's not. So that's an awesome point. But with all that changing, our next question is a good segue is, what do you do to know that you're doing homeschooling the right way and stop second guessing yourself that they'd be better off in school, that you're not qualified to do this? Selena, what would you say?
I would say don't worry about other people's opinions. That's the biggest struggle for me when I started in kindergarten, we were doing school at home. We were doing an hour per subject, and I could tell within 3 months that we were failing at that. The other thing is, don't be afraid to fail. I think schools really change our mindset that failure is bad, but here we're trying, failing, and adjusting as a family. So understand that failure is a part of the process. Again, don't listen to other people's opinions, because it's God's opinion that matters. So if God has put this on your heart, trust in his grace and his mercy to get you through the hard days, because there will be hard days, and his grace and his mercy are new every morning. And it's as we got through, I think like year 2 or 3, I saw the difference in my children. And that's when we would get to family gatherings, I would see the difference in how my children's vocabulary was different, my children's attitude towards me were different, and my children's attitude towards their siblings and those who were their peer age and younger. They just adjusted better. And I had to honor that they were better adjusted by being home than they would have been by being in school.
Excellent. Jen?
I have had the perspective of being a public school teacher and a Montessori teacher before I was a mom. And so what gets me through those moments is the memory that we can all we're seeing, I think, when we pick our kids up at 3 o'clock is them having, they're coming home with their homework and their finished work that they've completed. And we're not seeing that the teacher may have had a bad day that day too, that she may be crying in the break room with, the other 3rd grade teacher, wondering, worrying that she ruined everybody's lives that day too. And I mean, and that is not to put teachers down. That is to say, that's all of us. That's all of us feeling like we had a bad day at work today. And the hard thing about it with homeschooling is, I think when you're a teacher, you can have those 1 or 2 difficult students that are hard. When it's your family and you have those 1 or 2 difficult students, and that's 75% of your entire student body, you feel more worn down by that. You can't just be like, oh, these are my 2 problem children this year. Oh, they're my only children. It's exhausting. But I remind myself, that any classroom has that student who doesn't have the greatest attitude. That just may be my kid this year. I have a 6-year-old who is determined not to learn how to read, and there are tears every single day, and it's okay. There'd be somebody, she'd be doing that if she was in school. So I mean, don't take it hard on yourself. and everyone has days. I'm sure all of our husbands have come home from work sometimes and they've just had that day. That's going to be you. When you homeschool your kids, you will have those days, you will have those weeks, and it's okay.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I love how you talk about teachers. On our last Q&A call last week, we had a good discussion about the pros and cons of formerly being a classroom teacher and then homeschooling, because there are some things that help and there are some things that are just not helpful that we have to completely erase in our brain.
Yes.
But as far as like, from my perspective, knowing this is to look at your kids, not anybody else's kids or anybody else and the way they do things. Like whenever I get into the second guessing, self-doubt, is I just stop looking everywhere else and look at my kids and my family and say, am I doing right by them? Am I trying and loving? Are our relationships building? And maybe there are things I need to be doing better, but I can't identify the right things to improve upon unless I block out the world, quite frankly, and look at my family unit. Lots of prayer. We can't do this without prayer. And I don't mean spend an hour a day in silent adoration or wake up 2 hours before your family and pray in absolute solitude. That works for a lot of people. But I'm a big believer that we have to, if you do that, do it. But you also, and most, I think more importantly, have to pray all throughout the day in your head, keeping God close, keeping Christ next to you, calling on our Blessed Mother and say, you know, help me through this. Help me be the mother you want me to be. I have a morning prayer I say that mentions entrusts my children to Mary. And one of the lines says, please fill in for my deficiencies. Basically, I'm not perfect, but you are. So if you could just do that part, that'd be great. What else did I put? Yeah, back to the school thing, there are going to be mistakes made. There are going to be gaps in their education, but show me a child who's been educated where there are zero gaps, where there have never been a mistake made, where they've never, you know, been frustrated or it was overly simple or overly difficult. Gaps, I hear that a lot, but like, we can't learn everything there is in the entire world anyway. We all are going to have gaps. So don't look at that. And then finally, I would just say, so when I hear people ask, like, how do I know I'm doing the right thing? What I remember is that this homeschooling thing is a really big burden. It is. It's a choice to take on the entire education of our children. And it's huge, which is why we need God and have to rely on Christ for it. But part of that, as women especially, is that makes us have an emotional response rather than a practical response. So I go to my husband and I say, okay, now I do that. Caveat, when we first homeschooled, he wasn't 100% on board. So I found other friends to talk to about it, not him. But I would say to them or now to him, whoa, I'm feeling overwhelmed, like things aren't going great and I am just not sure where we're headed. And he will usually take the emotional reaction that I'm having and calm it down and help me to look objectively as to what we need to do, if we need to make changes or not. We've had homeschooling years that are just survival years, but my kids did great. They still progressed, and that was key to me. Yes, I will share that morning prayer. I'll find it before the end of the call and tell you what book it's in and post it. So we mentioned bad days, and everybody has them. So one of the questions was, what are your tips for getting a bad day back on track, or having a child who doesn't want to learn or doesn't want to be homeschooled maybe, and how do you cope with the bad day or the resistant child? Jen, what do you think about that?
Sure. So sometimes we'll take a break. We'll just, in fact, today we went and we, cause it's like 100 degrees in Texas right now, North Texas. And so we just took a break. We closed all our school books and we went and we didn't go outside. We did Wii dance. I put dance music on the Wii and we just danced for probably an hour. And then they were tired and they were able to refocus. So we'll do that. Or, you know, whatever else, jumping rope, we'll go out in the garage. I let my kids shoot hoops, to just kind of get out some energy, use a different part of their body, let the brain rest, and then we'll come back and we'll try again. And that usually gets them pretty set to go get that pent up energy out.
Awesome. Selena, you're going to say something similar, right?
Yeah, we do dance party, 100%. We usually do a dance party breaks throughout the day. So we'll do about morning time, that usually lasts about an hour. Then they'll do mathematics independent work that usually lasts about 30, 45 minutes. And then we'll do a dance party break. And then we'll do a read aloud. I really enjoy reading to my kids. It's fun for me. So when they're having a bad day, I usually pick a book that they know they're going to love, and it's a comfort to both of us. And I found that I do that for myself too. If I'm having a bad week or a bad month, I tend to pick a book that I know the ending. So it's trying to instill that habit I've developed for myself and my children. We usually plan a fun day once a month with their friends. And so we did that today. It's just the families that we've been quarantined with that we've been having dinners together already. So we had them over, and they really enjoy those friendships that they've created. And it's just, maybe one family that has similar ages as your kids that you can connect with. They have similar interests. So it's basically a time for me and the other mom to chat because all the kids are occupied with their friends. So that's something I would try to cultivate and plan. You don't need a big group. You just need one or two families with similar ages that, hey, we're going to meet on Friday for Rosary and Park Day. Let's just do our short lessons till Thursday, and Friday we're going to have a fun day. Lunch, once the weather gets cooler, it's not right now, but schedule those once a week, once a month, play dates, fun times with their people that they know, so that they know they're in this with another family, that they're not the only ones doing this.
Awesome. That's a very good point. I like that for the resistant child. Yeah, it's tricky to know what will help each child get back on track or to, have a positive attitude. So that's also a lot of trial and error here. But things that generally work for just having a bad day is definitely hitting a reset button. And if we add water, a read aloud, or food, generally attitudes improve. Or outside. There's 4 things. Outside. You know how like when you have a baby and they're crying and you're like, what do I check to see? So when my kids are having a bad day, we check, do we need to go outside? Do we need to play with water? Do we need to eat something? Those kinds of things really help us just reset. And then motivation and helping kids. I found that at each of my kids at different seasons, something different motivates them. And it's kind of like playing detective for me to figure out what is it that motivates them to get this done. And some seasons that means I bribe them, and I'm okay with that. Some seasons it means I tell them to suck it up and figure it out because they might need to do that. But most of the time it's something in between, and it's, hey, we're going to do this fun thing either later in the week or later this afternoon, but we have to get the work done first. We kind of just have a rhythm where we do chores and school before we play. And so they know that whatever's coming that's fun or even just their free playtime doesn't happen until the work is done. And we work that way. So it's kind of trying to figure that out. I think if you have a child who's coming out of a school environment and you're planning to homeschool and kind of do this, and they're just like, this is not for me, you need to find out why they think that. Most of the times it's friends, but sometimes it's other things. And if it is friends, Selena's absolutely right. We have to prioritize as homeschooling families finding our children friends. And that's actually a gift rather than a burden for me, because I get to choose their friends and try to choose people that I feel would be good Christian examples to them, that would be good influences on them, and would help them. And especially when they get into middle school and high school, I have to do things that I don't want to do so that they can go be with friends, because that's more important in those ages. When they're young, they really don't need a ton. We have a weekly park day. And so with Catholic homeschoolers, and we just meet at a park every week, and whoever shows up, and they all play and they love it. My teenagers, it's more like, okay, they were invited to this thing. We have to get rides. We have to orchestrate all of this. It's a little more complicated, but it's still important And so we make those sacrifices to do that as they get older and prioritize that. Okay, so that's about getting your kid back on track with a bad attitude. What about mom? We have a lot of things going on. How do we stay sane? How do we do that self-care that is so important, especially when you don't have maybe nap time anymore, or you don't have quiet and alone time? Selena, you're the queen of this. Help us out.
I was, and I quit my gym membership. It's so hard.
COVID.
But now, you know, if they were at the gym daycare, they'd be watching a movie anyway. So guess what? They watch a movie. And it's an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever it is. And I work out for 45 minutes and I shower alone. My 10-year-old can keep my 5-year-old from hurting himself. She's not paid to be a babysit, but if you have a 12-year-old and you have a 2-year-old, you know, pair them up. You know, mom's health is the most important in the house, and that includes mental and physical. So if mommy's not doing well, nothing's going to flow. So the kids have learned that when I'm exercising, it's like I'm at a job. I'm not available, and that's okay. It means they're bleeding. Yes, I'll come help them. But they shouldn't get into trouble that way. And then also, you know, prioritizing my budget to make sure I have healthy meals. I found if I don't have healthy food on hand, I just would eat whatever snacks are in the pantry. And that's not good for me long term. I have to have healthy meals on hand, ready to go. That sometimes means like buying prepped meals or having some space, some time set out on Sunday and Thursday to prep meals. So I'm not scrounging around trying to make lunch while I'm trying to grade math at 10:45. So having prepped food is really successful for me. And that doesn't mean I have all my meals planned out and everything separated. It's just having a thing of cooked chicken and having a bag of salad and having some vegetables cut. Like just having it ready makes a huge difference. That way I'm not hangry while I'm trying to make their lunch. And then I find if I'm hangry, I tend to be snappy, just like they're with me. So having meals prepped and exercise is really key for me. And then also instilling a quiet time, making that a habit for everyone to sit down, even if it's 20 minutes. We're all going to sit down and we're going to read for 20 minutes. For the 5-year-old that's looking at his favorite picture books. For the 7-year-old that's looking at graphic novels that she likes. And for me, I have a stack of books that I'm like, just 20 minutes, I'm going to read a little bit. And everyone gets filled up. And they need to be away from each other for a little bit every day.
That does help. Awesome ideas. Jen, what do you think about self-care and staying sane?
Sure. I don't have a whole lot to add to what Selena said. I think all her points were wonderful. For me, when I'm starting to get snappy with the kids is when I'm tired. So when I have a little one like this, and you know we're up in the night too, doesn't stop when we go to bed, as for most people with babies, and I'll just take a nap and I'll tell the kids, you can't wake me up unless it's an emergency, and I lay down on the couch, and if the toddler wants to cuddle up and go to sleep too, that's fine, and the preschooler wants to sit on me, that's fine. I'm tired enough, I can sleep through it. So we'll do that. And it took me a while to get comfortable allowing myself to just go to sleep in the middle of the afternoon if I'm exhausted, but I'm a better person when I wake up. You know, we'll do, so that'll be my 20 minutes. And you know, sometimes my kids tend to stop napping early. So, you know, that'll be kind of in lieu of a quiet time, I guess. They can play, you know, somewhat where they're not supposed to wake me up, I guess, is the one recommendation. And I'll usually have my oldest kind of make sure the little ones stay out of the kitchen so they're not crawling around on the counter. But otherwise, leave mommy alone for 20 minutes and I'm gonna rest. Exercise is great when the weather is good. You know, we'll try and get out there together. But with 6 little ones, I find I can't walk the neighborhood streets, or I'm like mother duck with all the little tiny babies trailing behind. So, you know, I've had to be a little creative about it. But when I'm good on the sleep, we're usually pretty good. And then the big thing I'm always keeping an eye on is the curriculum working for me and for the kids. And so, you know, if I'm enjoying schooling them, then I'm not dreading that piece of our life at all.
That's awesome.
Just stay up on the sleep.
Yeah, those are important. You know, and again, this is one of those things that changes in every season. Like what you can do, what's most important to you. Jacqueline, it never fails that my girls are actually playing nicely when it is time for quiet time. Yes, that happens to us too. I still tell them it's quiet time. Just, but yeah, and Amanda said, I noticed when we had to finish this last year online, I had them read around 9:30 so I could prepare a veggie, fruit, and nut platter. I tried to have it out each day by 10 a.m. and it was out all day for snacking. We added cheese and meat occasionally. It is amazing how much happier kids are when they snack. And some people don't like to have the kitchen open all day, but if you have a designated snack or designated time or designated buckets, I've heard that definitely helps. I know that self-care for me changes every season, and in the hard seasons when I can't get away or I can't get time for myself, I try to figure out what is it that I love doing with my children that will also rejuvenate me. So I like reading aloud to them. I like playing board games and card games. I like doing some things with them, going to the library. So those are the things that I'll prioritize because it brings me joy while I'm with my kids. But I also make sure that they understand, especially as they grow older, you know, I mean, once they're past first or second grade, they can start to understand that mommy needs time to do things she likes to do too. And so I always tell them I will be a better mommy if I get to do whatever it is. So maybe it's call my friend on the phone, or maybe it's leave the house and, you know, leave them with my husband to go to a coffee shop, or sit and read a book, or whatever it is. I point out to them that mommy will be a better mommy if I can have this time to do this. And they definitely want me to be happier, and they can see the difference, you know, once I point it out. And then I really think it's important that our kids see that we are people. We're not just their servant to do whatever. And so we really do need to teach them to play independently when it's appropriate for appropriate lengths of time. We need to teach them to help fix snacks and meals when they get old enough. You know, 5, 6, 7 years old, they can pull out snacks and help themselves if you have designated what's allowable. So I try not to overwork myself. I try to make sure they're doing chores, make sure they're helping out around the house and helping mom, so that I am not as exhausted and overwhelmed and pulled in 20 directions, which was hard for me to learn because I'm one of those do-it-yourself. Like it'd be faster and easier and better done if I do it myself. But it's kind of overwhelming and exhausting as a mom. Yeah. Awesome. Oh. So next question is kind of related, is keeping up with all these things. If you are not much for planning things out or organization or keeping up with everything, what do you do? What tips do you have to make that work, Jen?
Yeah, so this is me all the way. I'm not a planner. I've tried planning and it made me miserable, which I was embarrassed about, but I just had to let it go. And what I have done with whatever subjects I can is start at page 1, and I have a bookmark in the books, and we just proceed. And so there's not a lot of planning. I turn the page each day and do whatever is going to come next. For as many subjects as I can, and at this point, it's most of them. For my oldest, who's going into 5th grade, we sat down at kind of a point where she had wrapped up several of her books. I guess you could call it the end of a semester. I don't know when it was. It was right after Christmas or something. And we said, all right, you know, we're buying the next book in the next grade level for these different subjects for you right now. We're going to sit down and we're going to count through the pages, and we're going to see what a reasonable amount for you to get finished by the end of May is. And we just picked a page number. And she can decide for herself, do I want to do 2 pages today because I'm enjoying this topic? Do I want to give myself a day off? She's randomly come up to me and said, Mommy, I gave myself Tuesday off, which is fine as long as she meets her deadline, which is in May. So she gets to manage all that herself. Now, I guess my 8-year-old son, when he's 10, I don't think he'll be ready for that. So you just kind of have to see where each child is. But my oldest is a type A personality, so she was excited about it and definitely ready. But that just takes some of the managing responsibility off of me. If she's gonna ski in May with those subjects done, she can pace them out as she wants to. So that's, I guess, how I organize. I do as little of it as I need to.
That's wise. Selena?
I really like Pam Barnhill's thought process of loop scheduling. So our morning basket is on a loop and our subject work is on a loop for my daughter. She just doesn't like grids and lesson plans and schedules just really hinder her personality. And it was part of that mindset that was making her resistant to homeschooling. She's like, I don't want to schedule. What if I like this book? What if I want to read it for 20 minutes? So we have a stack of books for loop scheduling time when it's subject work, and we read a little bit from each book, and then we put the stack away. And we do that loop schedule like probably 2 or 3 times a week. And then morning time we do as a family. My husband leads it. I just hand in the books and trust that he does it. And sometimes they throw him under the bus and say, Dad didn't read the Bible passage this morning, Mom. And like, wow, they're the principal, not you. And then I'm like, hey, the kids missed Bible time this morning. And he's like, yeah. Like, so kids, if you hand them the books and they can see them, they'll tell you right away, like, hey, Mom, we didn't do poetry at all this week. So I think having whatever pieces, whatever tools you're going to use that year, having them out, yes, it can get messy, but it makes them accountable and makes you accountable to, hey, we have this stack of books, we want to read them together. Let's just do a little bit each day.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, I think you made a really good point, Jen, is that a lot of it is about choosing your curricula wisely. If you are not a big planner or really well organized, choose the things that don't make you be one. You know, whether that's, you know, all the individual materials that just, like you said, go in a row, or whether that's a full program that comes with the step plan and all you got to do is follow it. You know, lots of options there. I am naturally organized. I love planning and organizing. So it's funny. It's hard for me to explain to other people how to plan and organize because it just comes so naturally. But yeah, it's entirely possible to homeschool and just kind of go to the next thing. I know Sarah McKinsey had a really popular post, still popular, about spiral notebooks for planning. And she literally for a season just sat down the night before and made a to-do list for the next day based on what they accomplished so far. And so it was kind of planning, but it was so short. It was like less than 5 minutes each day to just plan the next day. But I like that simplicity because you know you're making progress. And I like you said, Jen, pick a target end date and a target to finish it and then keep moving. Like Selena said at the beginning, you do have to be consistent in doing the work if you're going to homeschool. You can't just, you know, say it's not going to get done. Even if you choose an unschooling model, you're still making sure there are resources in your home that would be educational. And that takes action. That takes doing something. So I think that's being a good steward of the time that we have with our kids, and, you know, making sure that their education is what it should be. You know, also, I'll just mention organization tips in the group. We've talked a lot about organizing the stuff, organizing the school supplies and the books and you know, there's the schoolroom, there's lots of different options and suggestions, and you just have to do what works for you on getting organized, because it's going to be different. You know, it's going to be different for someone who it comes naturally to someone who it doesn't. And so that's something to keep in mind. Awesome. Okay, Lisette had to drop out early. Did I miss anything else? We have a couple really specific questions that I want to hit quickly, and then we'll open it up for further Q&A. But these are good. One is, should I be worried of my child being accepted back to public school if he ever chooses to do so? Jen, do you have thoughts on that?
You know what? I don't. My only thing I would say is I would call the school system and ask them what they're looking for, because I think that's going to vary from school to school, especially if you're looking at a private school. I would just talk to them and tell them your concern. And homeschooling is, you know, I was homeschooled. I was so long ago, right? When it was weird. That is not the case anymore. You know, everyone is seeing it, especially since quarantine schooling. So many people are doing it. They're going to be happy to sit down with you and walk you through, you know, what they're going to be looking for. So I would just ask, really.
That's a great tip. Yeah, I think it's a good point that it's going to be different depending on your state and depending on the public school, private school that you're going into. for the most part, from talking to moms all over the country, until you get to about 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, it does not matter. They will just put your kid, public school will just put your kid in at their age level and then figure it out from there. A lot of private schools will do an assessment to figure out where they would be placed. And then once they get into kind of middle school and high school, or once they get into middle school, they'll also do some placement sometimes to figure out where would be a good place. High school is one time when I would say, if you're going to switch to a brick and mortar school, everybody froze but me. Can you still hear me? What just happened? Okay, I hope you can still hear me. Somebody say hello. But I would say in high school, if you're considering putting your kid back,
Which is watching the shows and putting the subtitles on, and you know, it's amazing what they'll just pick up hearing it in the home. She's back.
I'm sorry. Wow, I don't know what happened. I got completely kicked out of my own call. That was fun. What have you been talking about, ladies?
I got this nice little blurb that said you're the host now. Like, oh, okay.
You're in charge, Selena. Sorry.
We were discussing bilingual curriculums, and I said that we like to put movies on in Spanish or French and then put the subtitles in English. Elsa is mean in Spanish. She does not play around.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, I have a friend whose high schoolers used Sesame Street in Spanish to work on their Spanish skills in high school because it was stuff they would have already, known.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, bilingual curriculums. I know there are some out there. I've been told there are several Christian and secular ones, but I think there's only one Catholic one that's specifically for homeschoolers. So that's something to look into. Awesome. Jen, did you get to answer the question in the chat about what curriculum you use?
Oh, no. It's a little bit of everything. I order a lot of the Spectrum books, D and K, just right off Amazon. I am a former Montessori teacher. My soul is Montessori. There's just a lot of that that's not practical in the home, but wherever possible, I'm pulling out Montessori materials to use for my kids. So that's what I love, to be able to have space to fall back on. I'm so sorry for the background noise. She's just
It's okay.
It's bedtime.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so I'm sorry I can't give a real quick answer to that. And I'm always trying out new stuff. We have some Catholic heritage that we're doing. I love their history and their catechesis. Yeah, it's
okay.
If somebody wants to message me, I would be happy to just kind of write out a list, but it would be a long list. Okay, I'm gonna go stick her in the swing, and I will be right back.
Okay, awesome. I think probably we could all say that, Selena, and probably you too, is that I think the three of us are far enough along in our journeys that we pick and choose from whatever works, and we have different curricula that we look to as influences that we pull from. But there's not like a set, we do it this way, for the three of us anyway. Although there've been
only really one mom that I know of that does a set curriculum that's workbook based, and it's because she works from home full time. So them doing their independent work for 2 to 3 hours daily, getting their homeschool done, is what gets her best to move further in her job. So
right.
But since I don't have a full-time job, I have the freedom to be eclectic in my homeschool. Mm-hmm. Science is all over the map for us. Science just goes all over the place. But I love science, so I'm like, I don't want to stick to one book. I want to just see what's published this year and see how we can use it. So
awesome. Yeah. No, that's definitely very common. Very common. Cool. We did have a question about working. I don't think any of us have experience homeschooling and working outside the home in a full-time or part-time capacity. I've done a few things here and there, kind of like side jobs. But I have a really dear friend I just had this conversation with, so I will share what tips she gave me. She actually worked in the home, but she had set hours, kind of like your friend Selena. where she absolutely could not like be interrupted. So she kind of was gone. She was locked, and so obviously she had to have someone in charge of the children while she was doing that. That was the first thing, is whether that was a teenager or dad or sometimes she had her grandparents come in and do that. But as far as working outside of the home, I've also heard of families who homeschool on Saturdays and Sundays if they have to get, work done, and the kids are in more of a child care situation some other days. They might do school that needs mom or dad in the evenings, whereas during the day, like Selena mentioned, they're doing more independent work. There are online academies and virtual schools that if, you still want to be in charge of your child's education, but can't be with them constantly teaching, that are options, and you can do that. I think the key thing that my friends who had the situation put in my mind is she really had to plan what her kids were going to be doing during the time she was working, whether that was, she was in the home, but even outside. So it wasn't just a free-for-all. It was, they had these activities that they did each day. She would prepare things for some of the younger ones. She would buy particular, I don't know if she would call them curricula, but she would buy particular activity books or things that she wanted her big kids were going to do during that time when she needed to not be interrupted. And that she kept all her kids apart during that time. Like they each had their space in the house for those 2 hours every day that they were not going to be interacting, because that limited the fighting and the just mob mentality of causing problems and that kind of thing. Those were the two things that stuck out in my mind. But homeschooling is so flexible. Flexible scheduling is very possible. And I think it's just kind of talking to people who've done that and figuring that out from there. I think the only question on our list that we didn't cover from the pre-registration is if your child has some accommodations at school. So I'm assuming that means like special needs, learning disabled, or something to that effect. Do either of you have experience with that and what that looks like in the homeschool?
My daughter is dyslexic, and my preschooler is mostly nonverbal still. So a little bit. I mean, they weren't in the school system getting accommodations prior to this, but you can piece that together, and no one knows your child better than you do. So I think you can really see what they need and then seek out those resources. I don't think that means that everything is going to be done by you in the home. We're taking my preschooler to speech therapy class. But with my dyslexic daughter, I made a little part-time job for myself trying to figure out what curriculum was going to work best for her and what kind of resources she needed, and we just worked on it together. And I know what to be aware of as she's reading now, and that's been our thing. We've honestly kind of bonded over it. So it's a beauty of homeschooling. Really, you can have an individualized plan for all of your children.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I know lots of families who, homeschool with special needs or learning disabilities, or, all the different spectrum labeling of things, and they always get support. I think that's key, Jen. Most of the homeschooling curriculum providers have someone who's designated to help those parents of kids with special needs or kids with unique situations, and help modify curriculum, help adapt. There are consultants and companies that work specifically for homeschoolers to do that. And there are also outside therapies available. Some states, or depending on states or ISDs, have favorable laws where your kid can still get services from the public schools while you continue to homeschool them in a majority of subjects. So there's lots of options out there. It's just being that advocate, like you said, Jen, and seeking out the help your kids need. So, do you mind if you mute for a little bit, Jen?
Please go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Just let her settle. It's so tough. So that's something we've talked about in the group a bit, and there's some great resources in there. So that's the list of questions, but I know we've got lots of moms here who've been listening. I'm seeing you take notes and pop on and off. So pop your questions in the chat box if you have additional follow-up questions, and let us know what you're still thinking, and we'll take a few of those before we wrap up here. So Sandra asks, where to start to build a very good library at home? Oh, Selena's gonna get this. She's like, look at her face. She's like drooling. I'm gonna say my piece first, but it's really generic. There's so many good book lists out there that have really great titles. It's kind of like seeking a curriculum is finding the kind of book list that like suits your family, and finding which places give you the best fit for your kids and the things that multiple kids are going to use. And so we do have a bunch of those in the group too. I think we have a whole thread on different places to look at book lists. That's super helpful when you're getting started. Selena, what would you recommend?
Read Aloud Revival by Sarah Mackenzie. Her book, The Read Aloud Family, and Jim Trelease's The Read Aloud Handbook. Both have really excellent book lists. You could probably find the books themselves at your local library, and they're separated by age range. But for us, the really philosophy is if I don't like this book reading to my kids, that means it's not a good book. So it's not necessarily we buy books for ages, we buy books for our family. Like Jen said, you find the culture of your family. My other favorite resource is Mater Amabilis, their literature list. Any subject, any book on their curriculum list is an excellent resource. I have never been disappointed by anything that I've ordered from there. And the way that we've built it is we've built it through Christmas and St. Nicholas feast days and birthdays. So for birthdays, Christmas, Easter, they always get a book, whatever season.
Oh, did you freeze? We cannot hear Selena. Yeah, I know she's told us this before, that she that they buy those books on, for gifts. And I think the books that she buys for gifts, which is what we have started doing too, are those books that you can't get at the library, that you can't get at the half-price bookstore. The Catholic titles that are harder to find discounted because they're just not available are the ones that we prioritize purchasing new for gifts and so forth. And then, going to all the used places and buying all the things that you can find. Oh, she's even gone. Selena, come back. Internet's being difficult tonight. So that would be my recommendation, as well as I like Read Aloud Revival too, that Selena mentioned. There's a book list, since I have a bunch of boys, that's called Books for Boys and Other Kids Who'd Rather Build Forts All Day. So it's kind of those adventure stories that keep you going and keep, and my kids have found lots of good titles in there. And, a lot of homeschoolers really do focus on getting the classics. We all agree that all these books have stood the test of time, and that is one way to go. But like Selena mentioned, Read Aloud Revival really has a good mix of the classics and some of the modern books that are good, but need to be pre-read and made sure they're not crazy. So that's a good place to start. Oh, Selena is texting me. Her Wi-Fi is down. She won't be back. We're so sad. Okay. Any other questions before we close up? Jen, I'm going to unmute you and see. Did you have thoughts on a home library, Jen?
Nothing beyond what you've already added. I think it was perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So wave at me when you have input. Any other questions, ladies, before we wrap up? I know I promised that I would read that prayer that I mentioned earlier. But if there's any other questions that you have that we didn't cover, we really covered a lot, didn't we? Every question that we answered tonight has been asked in the group and has dozens of responses from mamas. I know sometimes the group can be tricky to search, but if you are looking for something and you can't find it, just tag one of us, message one of us. We will help you find it. There's so much good information there, and these are such good questions that everybody asks. And different answers work for different people. So I love that we can, we gave you 3 different answers here tonight, but you get 5 more answers. You might find something even better for you. Oh, she's maybe joining us again. Let's see if she went on data. So keep that in mind. And when you have questions, submit them in the group and we will try to answer them. There you are, Selena. So I put in the chat box earlier that the prayer I mentioned is in this book. Mine is, okay, so it's called Mother's Manual, and mine is literally like, it's been taped together so many times that it's just a mess. But I love this book so much. And I'll post the, the cover in the group so you guys can find it. But the prayer I mentioned is called For Protection of One's Children. So I think I will just read that as a closing prayer so that we can finish up and tonight. So let's pray this together in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Holy Mother Mary, by virtue of your divine motherhood, you have become mother of us all. I place the dear ones God has given me under your loving protection. Be a protecting mother to my children. Guard their bodies and keep their thoughts ever holy in the sight of their Creator and God. Guard their hearts and keep them pure and strong and happy in the love of God. Guard always their souls, and preserve in them faithfully the glorious image of God they received in baptism. Always, Mother, protect them and keep them under your motherly care. Supply in your all-wise motherhood for my poor human deficiencies, and protect them from all evil. Amen. Queen of the Most Holy Family, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I hope that you found some answers tonight, ladies, and this was helpful to some of you. And I'm just really glad that you guys popped on. Thank you so much to Jen and Selena for answering the questions. We are doing another call tomorrow night, also for beginners, also Q&A, but switching gears a little bit to talk to people who maybe aren't going to continue homeschooling, because as I said earlier, our answers will be a little bit different. So you're welcome to pop on that call too. You may still hear some good advice that will apply to you, but be sure to pre-register and ask your questions. And thank you again for joining us.